We are here at the Kenyatta International Conference Center, Nairobi, Kenya, at the 4th SAF workshop. And I'm privileged to be joined by Mr. Peter Waweru, who is the Bleriot Group founder and chairman. Mr. Waweru, thank you for joining us. Could you please introduce yourself and your role in the SAF ecosystem?
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Waweru. I am the chairman and the founder of the Bleriot Group of companies. And the Bleriot Group has played key fundamental roles in the development of the ecosystem of SAF in this country. Top of which really starts with the development of a viable input model. Because as you heard during the conference, the biggest challenge that we are faced with right now is the development of a sustainable, viable mechanism for the development of feedstock input. So Bleriot has even a earmarked key subsidiary called Rencaster for the purpose of feedstock development, which we call energy agriculture. And that's one role. And that's what we call the upstream. The midstream of SAF is the actual processing of SAF from the feedstock input. And Bleriot has its foundation laboratories and also viable pilot refinery at our refineries in Ukunda, Diani Beach. Finally, the third leg of that is seeking out key partnerships with consumers, offtake agreements, for example, where we now have a Kenya Airways waiting to take up whatever quantities that we are able to process. And therefore, Bleriot Group has walked the upstream, midstream, and downstream ecosystem.
Oh, wow, with the company when it comes to SAF in Kenya. What is your main takeaway from this year's SAF high-level workshop here in Nairobi?
Interestingly, my main takeaway is that mostly is the challenges that they've actually identified so very clearly. Top of which it is the development of the viable mechanism for feedstock input. Number two, the development of viable technologies, particularly for Africa. And number three, the financing of all of these things. Now, interestingly, there appears to be no coordination that can be wrapped around all of these challenges right now. And therefore, I am grateful that a conference like this more or less spears the beast of challenges so that we can then go sit back in our silos and then come back with a consolidated mechanism where we approach government, we approach the multilateral funders, we approach private sector funders, we approach large commercial entities for farming, energy, agriculture, so that then collectively we overcome these challenges.
Okay. From a perspective, what policy or investment enablers are most urgent to unlock SAF production at scale?
The key of that, really, as I've said, is the viable inputs development model. And as you've heard, it's very, very important to, first of all, identify the viability in terms of land so that we do not get accused for competing with food. Therefore, in our case, we're looking for marginal lands. As an example, we're busy negotiating with the Ministry of, with NEMA specifically, to take over marginal lands that have been left by mining entities. So that's number one, identifying marginal lands that can be used instead of land that is already allocated to arable farming. That's number one. Number two, technology, as I've said, appears to be a key challenge. For example, when you talk about the technology providers worldwide, and we've got entities like Nesta, we've got entities like Topsol. These entities, the kind of capital that they actually require you for you to raise, in order for them to come along and set a viable refinery, appears to be a challenge. And therefore, in our case, we've identified that we actually have to have inbred, home-built technologies that work for Africa in African situations. Finally, as I've said, being able to sit with financiers in these nascent areas of commercial application. renewables have always been a very, very tricky thing for financing. If you do not have multilateral funding from entities like the World Bank, entities like the IFC, their sister company, NGOs and all of that, it becomes very, very hard to raise commercial capital. However, in our case, we've identified a model that could potentially work where you start with the minimum value proposition. In our case, we're going for a renewable fuel called biodiesel or FAME, fatty acid methyl ester. And from the revenues that we actually get from selling biodiesel, we are able then to go to the next step of building a viable SAF ecosystem with our own financing that is applied to building our own technology.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Peter Waweru. And as we come into a conclusion, in one sentence, just one sentence, what makes Kenya uniquely positioned to lead Africa in sustainable aviation fuel?
First of all, is the location of Kenya. It's bang in the middle. I mean, number two, Kenya is an aviation hub. Nairobi is an aviation hub. So those two things that Kenya, in terms of shipping, is centrally situated. Number three, in terms of land, Kenya is only 20% arable. The other 80% of land can actually be used to produce biomass without any competition to food crops. Therefore, it appears that really the only last thing would be, in Kenya, this whole thing of youth-driven technologies, we are able to become a magnet for skills that can be applied, engineers and chemists, and all of that, to actually have a viable technology model that is built for Africa by Kenya.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Peter Waweru. As you've heard it, Kenya it is. This has been Ian Wachira, Bleriot Group Media Officer. And thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for more interviews. Thank you.
Thank you.